The restaurant hums. Silverware ticks like a clock. My son's phone lights. He flinches at one text. "We voted. You're not family." He looks up, already sorry. If you want justice that actually lands, tap subscribe to stay. I'm Mara Green, 52, from Seattle. The Space Needle glows through drizzle beyond the window. Rain freckles the glass in patient rows. Traffic breathes outside. The hostess laughs softly near the door. A candle leans in its holder, throwing a slow halo on white linen. His water glass sweats onto a napkin, leaving a ring like a promise you can't make disappear. He clears his throat. He calls it a misunderstanding. He says it gently, like I bruise in drafts. I fold my napkin anyway, edge to edge, smoothing one corner with my thumb. The phone sits between us, face down now, like an animal told to stay. I tell him I can hear the restaurant's air vent. I tell him I can hear my own pulse. I do not tell him I can hear the word voted sliding all the way down, scraping everything on its way. I breathe through my nose and let the candle waver. Noise turns thin when a truth enters a room, and I decide not to chase it away. He reaches for my hand, then thinks better. He talks about household logistics. He talks about safety and efficiency. He uses a kind voice and a careful smile. It sounds like a policy meeting held inside a hug. He says, "We're trying to streamline things for you." The word streamline is a metal tube, slick and cold. I look at his eyes and see both boys. I see the 10-year-old who cried when a fish died. I see the 32-year-old who stopped crying when a budget did not balance. I try to place my voice on the table, not on his throat. "Streamline what?" The candle pops. He glances at his phone again, like gravity lives there. I knew about the group chat. You can feel when laughter happens without you. Rooms go lighter in the wrong places. Replies come too neat. Screenshots travel like rumors in clean envelopes. I knew before the text. My body already knew. The text only gave it a picture frame. He says I misunderstand their intent. He says the words "we" and "family" as if they are friendly twins holding hands. His mouth tries to make the word "we" mean shelter. The text made it mean committee. I sip water. The ice taps my teeth and I let it, because I need something that doesn't pretend to be gentle. I invited him to dinner. I picked a place with medium prices and soft lamps. I wanted the hum to help us. My plan was simple. I would listen until the listening felt used. Then I would say the line I practiced in the car. I would say, "Kindness without dignity isn't kindness." I didn't know a sentence would arrive first and steal the room. His wife could not come. "A scheduling crash," he said. She sent the text instead. The words wore her perfume even in pixels. Crisp, decisive, slightly sweet at the rim. "We voted. You're not family." It was not a typo. It was choreography. Clean, quick, into the artery. The waiter sets down bread. The butter's top shines like a little moon. I cut a corner and watch it melt. My son thanks the waiter. He still has that reflex. Manners as furniture. Polite even when the house leans. He coughs. He asks about my week. He wants a warm path back. I think of the brochure I found in my mailbox. The one for assisted living, folded into thirds like a friendly threat. I think of the spreadsheet his wife emailed for transparency. My cope name wasn't a person there. My name was a column for projected costs. I did not confront them then. I wanted proof to stop being shy. Proof likes quiet. It grows there, like mold behind the wall. I watched my bank app show a new helper icon I didn't request. I watched the helper run small tests, little debits like tapping a pane, checking for cracks. I watched the utility account migrate under the phrase, "for now." I watched my house become a talking point at other tables, where I was a menu item and not a guest. The first time she called my home an asset, I laughed at the wording. Then she did it again, in a tone that smoothed the corners off the word. The third time she said it, she added "our" in front. The fourth time, she didn't look at me after. I remember a Sunday when a realtor friend happened to stop by. He had comps printed in glossy colors. He set them on my coffee table like coasters. "Hot market," he said. "You could unlock so much freedom." Freedom sat there like an empty jar, ready for the label they had already chosen. I wish I could say I stood up then. I didn't. I made tea, I asked about schools, I asked about the new dog. I let the conversation chew my boundaries into soft bread. Because love makes you believe your own erasure is generosity. It felt noble. It was not. It was convenient for someone else. Back at the restaurant, a woman laughs 2 tables over. She leans toward her friend like ducklings do. The candle wax drips and hardens as it falls. My son asks if I have my medications set up in one of those little boxes. I tell him my pills do not require a box, and also my brain does not require a wrangler. He nods without hearing. When people plan your life for you, they forget your hearing arrives before their need. He says the word vote with an apologetic shrug. He says it like we took a temperature. He says it like it was just a pulse check. No, darling. Votes come with structure. Votes come with the idea that someone could be out. Votes bring gavel energy to a kitchen table. Votes require ballots, and someone printed them. I keep my palm flat on the napkin. The cloth holds still under my hand, the way a skittish animal steadies when you don't flinch. I tell him I understand concern. I tell him concern is not possession. I tell him I know what love can sound like when it is afraid. Fear wears a clipboard. Fear schedules meetings. Fear drafts documents and calls them pillows. He asks if we can reset. He wants to start fresh. The bread grows a little stale at the edges. I imagine a tiny clock inside each slice, ticking away its softness. I ask if he would like to read the text aloud again. He winces. He says that is unnecessary. I say it might be useful to hear exactly what words can do when they think no one will answer. He doesn't read it. He breathes. And it sounds like compromise. He chooses new language, kinder nouns. He picks the word protect. It sits heavy on my plate next to the butter knife. Protection doesn't announce itself with ballots. Protection doesn't lock a door and call it shelter. I dab the knife in butter and draw a small line on bread. The line glows for a second, then dulls. That is what happens to soft promises when they meet air. A bus exhales outside, warm and weary. Tires hiss on wet asphalt. The restaurant door opens and closes, with a soft thump that feels like a heartbeat, learning to be mechanical. I watch the way his fingers rest on his phone, even when he thinks they don't. The body believes the brightest thing in reach is safety. He tells me the group chat is complicated. He tells me jokes get misread. He tells me tone can be hard in text. I nod and let him lay pillows around his version. There is a picture from last week. I saw it for an hour before it vanished. It was of my living room, posted in a thread labeled Options. The photo framed a dresser I have kept since my first apartment. The caption discussed staging. He cuts his steak into smaller bites than he needs. He used to do that when he was nervous about spelling quizzes. I want to press a hand to his head and tell him he is still my boy, even when he loses his map. Instead, I breathe and let the promise I made myself grow a spine. I promise to stop being the softest surface in every room. He says, "Mom, we need to agree on a plan." He says it like he believes agreement is a fruit he can peel and hand me. Agreement is a tree. It takes years, it takes storms. It cannot be handed over the appetizer. I tell him I am listening. I tell him I also brought something. The candle leans farther. Wax builds a pale mountain at its base. He nods, relieved to have structure again, even if it is one word on a plate. Brought. He likes when nouns arrive that can be moved with both hands. This is where I should say I found an attorney. This is where I should say that someone taught me the shape of my own name and paperwork that respects it. This is where I should say the word trust without flinching. I don't, not yet. I let him fill the space, because the last of my kindness owes me a little theater, and the end of an era deserves its proper curtain. He explains their vote as a temperature check performed by people who love me. The sentence is a couch covered in white fabric, pretending no one spills. He says his wife was emotional. He says she sometimes texts too fast. He says they meant we worry you're alone. The smoke detector in my chest does not turn off just because he waves a towel. When my husband died, I paid our son's last semester in a single check. I have the receipt still, tidy and folded. It smells like the cedar drawer where I keep it. I didn't tell that story to make him feel small. I told it to remind myself. I have always been a ledger that balances without their help. It is easy to forget you are competent when other people color code your life. The waiter asks about dessert. My son says no for both of us and then apologizes. He laughs and says it was habit. I accept the apology with a nod. Habit can be untrained. Habit can learn new tricks if the treats change. The waiter refills water and disappears again into the soft clatter of other lives. I take out my phone and place it on the table, face up. He watches it like it might explode. Nothing happens. I watch him instead. He thinks the danger is in the device. The danger, in his story, is actually in my spine. He does not know it yet. He will feel it when it stops bending. I tell him I would like to understand the spreadsheet. He brightens. He likes charts. He leans in, fingers tapping the edge of his plate. He starts with fixed costs. He moves to variable obligations. He says the word asset once, softly, then switches to property like the first word had teeth. He calls my bedroom a primary. He calls my kitchen a use case. He doesn't see what language can do to a body that cooks in a room turned into a category. I ask about the line labeled allowance. He flushes. He says it was a placeholder. He says the word placeholder. The way a magician says, now watch closely. The trick is old. The trick is labeling a person as a number, and then pretending the number is kindness, because the font is blue. I let him talk. I do not tug the curtain yet. I tell him I'm not angry. That is true. Anger is hot and quick. I feel something cooler. It is patience standing in a doorway, checking its watch, choosing when to walk in and collect its due. He says he is glad I am calm. He says it twice. Calm makes controlling people brave. They mistake it for consent. They mistake it for sleep. A couple near the window is toasting something. Their glasses sing when they meet. My son watches them, then looks back at me, like happy as a foreign language he once spoke. He says he misses Dad. He says everything grew complicated after. I nod and feel my throat soften for a moment. Grief is the only committee I still respect. It votes to remind you what love cost and what it never will again. I think of the first time his wife edited a message he typed. It was a text to me about a holiday dinner. The edited version added the phrase budget conscious in a place where an invitation usually puts a smiley face. I saved the original by accident. I saved the edit on purpose. Proof likes pairs, they show its outline. The waiter clears plates. My son's hands settle on either side of his phone, ready and helpless. He asks if we can just move forward. He invites the future to forgive the present. He does not offer the present to repair the past. He says, we want what's best. He means, we want what's easiest to manage. Best is a word that gets lost in hallways if you don't hold its hand. I take a breath that tastes like lemon and melted butter. I let it sit in my chest and choose a chair. I picture the drive home. Wipers slow, the red of brake lights smudging into rain. The long glass needle of the Space Needle, hanging above the city like a quiet metronome. I imagine the road steadier than the table, and that comforts me. He reaches for the bill. I place 2 fingers on it first. I tell him I ask him here, because I wanted him to look at me while I say the thing I should have said months ago. He leans back. His shoulders make a room of their own. The candle bends lower, like it doesn't want to miss a word. Kindness without dignity isn't kindness. I keep my voice low. He blinks like I turned a light toward him. He opens his mouth and then closes it, choosing careful, because careful is what his house runs on. It is not the worst fuel. It is not enough to power respect. I tell him I have been quiet, because quiet felt like proof of love. I tell him I was wrong. Quiet was a coupon someone else clipped, redeemable only at my expense. He swallows. He says he wants to fix it. He says he can talk to his wife. He says it like she is a gate with a keypad. I let the silence stretch into a path. It leads somewhere different than the one he built. I tell him I took steps to protect myself. His eyes flick to my phone again, out of reflex. Reflex isn't loyalty. Reflex is practice, and practice can change when the drill sergeant retires. I still do not name the steps. I let the weight of that truth occupy the space between our plates. Secrets, when they are kind, are not weapons. They are scaffolding. You reveal them when the building can stand it, not when it wants a new window. He asks if I am moving. He asks if he needs to come by this week. He asks if I have cash for cab fare like it is still 10 years ago. He does not know the shape of the next hour. It is not his fault. It is a consequence. The door opens again. Cold air kisses the back of my neck. The room lifts and settles. The phone on the table sits like a small moon again, quietly pulling tides. My son rubs his thumb along its edge. He looks at me, and I see the boy who used to press a shell to his ear to hear something bigger than himself. I want to hand him a better sound than the one he lives by now. I tell him I am finished being manageable. His eyebrows pinch, then smooth, like fabric ironed and worn in the same motion. He nods because he thinks nodding is a bridge you can build from any shore. He says he understands. He does not yet. Understanding will arrive later, carrying envelopes. The waiter drops the bill folder and vanishes again. The check has a tidy sum in black ink. Numbers behave better than people. They sit still when you look at them. I take out my card and slip it inside. My son starts to protest, then stops. Habit meets a locked door and remembers to knock. I press the folder closed and rest my palm on it. The table holds the weight easily, the way the city holds rain, like a second skin. I say we will talk again soon. I say tonight is about listening. He relaxes a fraction. He believes this is a pause, not a shift. He thinks the word we is intact. He doesn't know I cut it open and checked its stuffing. It was mostly fear and convenience. The candle dies with a wet sigh. A thin thread of smoke writes a brief message in the air and disappears. He pockets his phone, finally, like a child told enough. I smile, small. I gather my bag. The chair legs whisper on tile as I stand. Outside, the street smells like damp cedar and bus brakes. Headlights comb the blocks for something worth finding. I breathe the city in, slow, and feel my shoulders drop one rib lower. He steps beside me, close, but not touching. We look up together at the dark spire against cloud. It looks like a pin holding the sky to the fabric of the night. He asks if I'll text when I get home. I say yes. The word leaves my mouth clean. Promises still mean something here. They still belong to me. He nods and kisses my cheek. His stubble is sandpaper and memory. He says goodnights like a wish, not a command. I file that small mercy where I keep the rescue rope. In the car, the dashboard glow paints my hands an easy blue. Wipers drag rain into straight lines, then release it. I sit with the engine on and let the heater hum. The restaurant lights shrink in the rear view, then soften into a string of pearls I no longer need to wear. I rest my phone in the cup holder. I imagine the road unraveling ahead like a ribbon, steady and forgiving. I think of the word family and feel its spine. It is not a circle. It is a verb that asks for witnesses. Tonight, the witness is me. I check my mirrors and ease into traffic. The lane accepts me without a vote. The city breathes in the drizzle and holds it without complaint. Tires whisper. Signals blink. Somewhere behind me, the bill is being tallied and filed. Somewhere ahead, a new ledger is clearing its throat. I merge, smooth, and let the green lights pull me forward. I have kept every receipt I need. I have kept one screenshot that does not tremble. I have kept, finally, my own voice. And in the hush between wiper passes, I hear it say the only thing that matters now. I didn't drive home right away. I let the wipers scrape their pattern and allowed the city to settle. The word voted kept trying to echo. I let it fade against the hum of tires. Night held the road. I held a different thing, the choice to stop being a use case. The pressure didn't appear in one earthquake. It arrived as furniture slid an inch, then an inch more. First, the group chat became a hallway I wasn't invited down. Then, a family meeting happened during a barbecue I wasn't told to attend. Photos reached me after, captioned with, "Wish you were here," as if forgetting to knock were the same as opening a door. I saved the pictures anyway. Screens remember tone when people pretend they don't. The next week, an envelope appeared under my doormat, crisp and friendly. It held an agreement labeled in soft blue, temporary care plan. The font smiled, the clauses didn't. My signature had pre-marked lines. Their signatures waited as if generosity simply needed my pen to begin spending me. I set the papers on the kitchen table and watched them sit like good dogs. When I didn't sign, the air changed temperature, the budget spreadsheet arrived, it inventoried my life like pantry staples. Categories multiplied under a polite header. For transparency. My name didn't appear in the list of decision makers. My name appeared beside, quote, what. I clicked the cell and saw a number that would not have covered my heat in winter. I breathed and closed the file. The heat inside me outran the one they had planned. Utilities moved next. Emails rerouted to an account I didn't create. For now, the subject line said, as if now were a temporary country they could occupy without a passport. I logged in and found my own address forwarded like a fragile package. I turned the forwarding off and took a photo of the setting. I began a small folder on my desktop called Proof. Inside it, dates did not puff themselves up. They just waited, still and blunt. A realtor friend happened to stop by again. He placed color printouts on my coffee table and said the market was generous to people who didn't delay. He called my house Liquid Freedom. Freedom made us sound like coins in a jar when he tipped the stack into a neat pile. I asked if he wanted tea. He said lapsang smelled like campfire. He was right. Smoke can remind you of rescue or loss depending on whether you still have the house. My son tried warmth. He brought groceries I didn't request and stacked them as if stacking were affection measured in cans. He spoke about efficiencies, bulk discounts, subscription deliveries. He believes savings are a love language. He is not wrong. He is unfinished. Love counts dollars. Respect counts doors that remain unlocked from the inside. I found the assisted living brochure again, this time with a sticky note. Just exploring options. No rush. The page with costs had a delicate circle around a number that matched a line in their spreadsheet. The circle was faint. Pressure rarely announces itself with bold ink. It prefers polite graphite that smudges and feels innocent. I didn't confront them. I confronted my confusion. I was not confused about being loved. I was confused about having my life managed as if love and management were synonyms with matching sweaters. I let the confusion breathe, and then I ironed it flat. Fear folds itself when you name it. I started naming things. I went to the bank first. The lobby smelled like paper and lemon. The chairs made you sit up straight. A woman with a badge that said T. Numien, assistant manager, asked how she could help. Her voice was brisk without cruelty, a tuning fork set to yes or no. I told her I was curious about helper access. She nodded, like doctors do when you try to describe a bruise. She explained view-only access. She explained authorized users. She explained what I had not authorized. She pulled up my profile and tapped a few keys. There it was. An invitation sent from my account to an email that belonged to my son. Acceptance logged in a line that didn't need drama to be true. My breath sat down. She offered water. I asked about revoking. She showed me the button and asked me to read the warning twice. She told me the system could push notifications when access changed. She told me I could schedule that push. It was such a small word for something that felt like architecture. Schedule. A bridge built out of minutes. She printed a sheet about alerts and slid it across the desk. She explained the path where my phone would vibrate, and his would too. She warned me that removing access could cause friction. She used the word friction like a doorstop, pragmatic and friendly. I thanked her. I did not mention the group chat that had already turned my life into a workshop without my permission. Friction existed. I preferred it within terms I could read. I left with a folder. Paper has weight. It reminded my hands I was not a theory. I called a friend from choir whose sister had navigated something similar. She gave me a name and said, she speaks paperwork like it's a second language. The elder law attorney's office smelled like rain and toner. Her door had a little plaque with her surname in gold. She introduced herself as Carmen Hale and shook my hand with a grip that respected both my bones and my time. She asked me to talk without apologizing. I tried. I told her about the spreadsheet, the utilities, the vote. I told her about being called an asset like a compliment that got lost on the way to my porch. She listened without jumping in to fix my verbs. She wrote nothing at first. She let the story sit until it was heavier than pity. Then she opened a pad and began drawing boxes. One for me, one for the house, one for accounts. She labeled them in tidy print. Revocable Trust, LLC, alerts. She explained a trust I could control. She explained a clause that would reflect reality instead of slogans. You can define family as behavior. she said. Not as a clan that thinks owning a shared photo album equals rights. She smiled at my face when it changed shape. Names can draw blood, so can definitions when they are finally correct. She described the clause like a carpenter, detailing a joint that wouldn't split. Respect. Presence. Care, she said, tapping each word. Documentable standards, not moral weather. If beneficiaries failed, the trust could move a portion elsewhere, to a scholarship fund, to a sibling, to an organization that sent kids to state science fairs. She didn't have to sell it. I saw my father's hands in the word scholarship. He taught shop and called splinters lessons with a point. We talked about the house as a thing separate from me. She suggested an LLC owned by the trust, with me as the manager. The language tasted odd, then right. Assets have managers, she said. People have boundaries. My grin surprised me. It felt like a small window opening in a room I thought was sealed. She asked about current delegations. I showed her the bank folder. She skimmed, nodded once, and wrote a crisp line: revoke, notify, archive. She suggested sending notices to every address connected to my accounts, then saving the delivery receipts. Polite paper grows teeth when people pretend not to remember, she said. Her voice put a chair under me I didn't know I needed. We planned the order. First, the trust. Then, the house papers. Then, the bank alerts. The notifications could be scheduled to coincide with a moment of clarity. She asked if there was one coming. I told her about dinner with my son. I told her I wanted the truth to arrive while we both had napkins and water. She tapped the calendar and drew a circle. We did not write a date inside it. We wrote a word: enough. We worked through sums. She asked about my accounts, balances, recurring charges. She didn't treat numbers like magic or shame. Numbers were planks. You could walk farther when they were arranged properly. We talked about my monthly choir dues. We talked about the auto pay on my internet. We talked about the small stipend I send to a neighbor's kid for mowing. She wrote each with arrows indicating stay. We backed away from drama and walked toward mechanics. Mechanics don't argue. Mechanics either fit or they don't. By the time she printed the draft trust, my pulse had changed tempo. The document had sections that felt like handrails. Successor trustee, revocation rights, care standards, grievance process. She suggested a 90-day review clause for anyone who claimed misunderstanding. Mercy, but documented. Kindness, but with a spine. I signed nothing that day. She told me to sleep on it, and not in the poetic way. Wake up and see if it still feels like a plan instead of a poem, she said. We'll execute when your stomach says yes. My stomach is cautious. It took a breath. The answer arrived steady: yes. At home, I opened the proof folder and tucked in a new subfolder called Plan. I scanned the draft trust and saved it. I scanned the sticky-noted brochure and saved that too. I was building a small museum where the exhibits did not lie. Curators know the weight of light. I adjusted mine. The next pressure came not as a knock but as a dinner invitation, with a cheerful emoji. Let's reset, my son wrote. He proposed neutral ground. He offered to pay. He suggested I bring any concerns in writing. The last phrase stood up and saluted. I made a note to thank him for the prompt. Before I left for that dinner, I returned to the bank. Tinoyen met me again with the tidy efficiency of a person who trusts systems and knows when to warn you about them. She pulled up the alerts page and asked if I wanted the notifications to be immediate or timed. I said timed. She asked what time. I chose 7:15 p.m. and watched her fingers type it with a certainty that felt like a lever locking. She repeated the hour back to me so the building heard it. Sometimes a number needs a witness that isn't human. I revoked the helper. She asked if I wanted to leave view-only access in place. I said no. Help that arrives without consent is a favor done to the helper. I made another stop before dinner. I walked into a quiet office where a notary stamped a neat rectangle under my signature. The sound of the stamp felt ceremonial, like a small drum that only I could hear. I notarized the revocation letters, the new account contact updates, the notice that any future paperwork must come through me or the attorney. I did not relish it. I did not apologize to it. Paper is not offended by being used correctly. The group chat went on with its photos. A cousin posted a meme about aging parents. It was the kind with a smiling cartoon nightstand and a reminder to hydrate. I hearted it. Hydration is a kindness with no claws. My son sent a photo of a new rug. I noticed the caption. It mentioned, "Making our primary cozy." My bedroom was a primary in their mouths. The rug was not in my house. A micro-flashback arrived while I was labeling files. The night my husband died, the hospital asked who could sign. My son had been 3 floors down getting a soda and a breath he could taste. The nurse waited without pressure. I signed my name. The pen felt too light. The room changed shape. Life sometimes asks you to be the adult, even when you're the most broken person there. I remembered that woman. I asked her to stand up and join me. Another memory uncurled. Years earlier, my daughter-in-law joked during brunch that we could monetize the extra bedrooms. She laughed and stirred her coffee. The spoon clicked on china. I laughed too back then. I thought we were both clever. The sound of the spoon has been in my ear ever since, like a metronome for a song I hadn't learned yet. There were costs for all this steadiness. They were not in dollars. The first cost was loneliness that felt like a hallway with the light broken. The second cost was doubt, which arrived in clean clothes and sat in my best chair. Doubt asked if I was making something out of nothing. Then it picked up the temporary care plan and read me aloud to myself. Nothing spoke perfect grammar, and I did not recognize my life in its sentences. I told Carmen about the loneliness. She wrote a number on a sticky note and told me it was the fee for her time. Then she handed me a second sticky note with the same number and told me it was the cost of being managed when you don't consent. Pick one, she said. You have already been paying the second one without a receipt. I stuck the first number on my fridge and called it a reminder to choose my expenses with my life included. My son texted to confirm dinner. He added a heart. He means well more than half the time. The rest is gravity. He falls toward the strongest voice in a room and believes it is his. I answered, I'll be there. 2 words that held a shape he couldn't see. The day of the dinner, I gathered a thin stack of envelopes with my name embossed in small type. Each held a single page summarizing a choice. Revocation notices. A 1-page overview of the trust's care clause. A polite letter explaining that my house now lives inside a limited liability company, and that decisions about its walls and floors travel through me. No rhetoric. Just nouns and verbs that register even when someone is pretending to be hard of hearing from convenience. I also printed photos. The spreadsheet cell labeled allowance, the forwarded utility email, the realtor's comps on my table, the vote text screenshot with its cold punctuation. Proof does not need drama to be legible. It needs a frame and a date stamp, even if the date lives in the corner where only I look. I parked outside the restaurant early and watched the rain lay down a fresh layer of calm. I listened to the heater hum and the dashboard click as the vents adjusted. I practiced one sentence out loud and in my head. Family is a verb. It felt too simple and exactly correct. I put the envelopes back into my bag. I added 1 tissue for me and 1 for him. I do not plan to use both. Planning never hurts. Inside, everything you know already happened. The phone lit, the text arrived. My son fumbled the moment and then tried to catch it with careful hands. My breath built a scaffolding. When I stood, I felt the weight of the envelopes the way a diver feels air. Back in the car after dinner, I sat with my palms on the steering wheel and waited for my pulse to choose a pace. I looked at the clock and watched the minutes slide toward the hour in the bank system. I didn't feel triumph. I felt correctness, which is a calmer thing. It doesn't jump. It nods. I had given myself 1 clean rule: no surprises that can't be explained with a single line. If he asked why the alerts came, I would tell him, access without consent got removed, that's all. If he asked what the trust meant, I would tell him, respect and presence are beneficiaries too. If he asked if I still loved him, I would tell him, you are my son. Love is not under review. Explaining shouldn't be an eviction. It should be a definition that can stand alone. At home, I opened the door to my house and let the smell of wood and lemon meet me. I locked the door because that is what you do when you live alone and intend to keep living alone on your own terms. I set my bag on the table and slid out the envelopes. I stacked them in the order my heart preferred. Trust first, house next, alerts last. The last packet included a small slip that read simply, "Notifications scheduled for 7:15 p.m. Even paper can keep a promise." I made tea and stood by the window while the kettle sang. Headlights yawned along the wet street. Somewhere, my son was carrying his careful grief and his misplaced confidence into his living room. Somewhere, he was explaining to his wife that he had handled it. Somewhere, her phone rested in the same room as the rug that was not mine. I called Carmen and let it ring once. I hung up so she would know I had done my part. She texted a thumbs up that looked nothing like a cartoon when it landed in my phone. She added, "Breathe." I did. Breathing is free and still counts. I took the thin stack labeled photos and slid it into a zippered pocket. I cleared the table. I wiped a small ring of water where a glass had been last week when my neighbor came over with tomato soup and gossip about the dog down the block. The ring disappeared. Some marks do. I slept the way you do when you decide something and the floor stops tilting. Morning arrived like a friend who knows not to knock. I watered the plant my husband used to forget. I ironed a shirt because crisp fabric helps when you plan to show someone a boundary without raising your voice. I packed my bag and placed my phone where I wouldn't fidget with it. I drove through drizzle and let the tires hum a steady song. Pressure kept attempting to perform. It sent me a gentle reminder about signing the temporary care plan. It texted a gif of a kitten hanging from a branch. It asked if I wanted to split an appetizer. I said yes to the appetizer. I said no to the plan. It is possible to be gracious and specific at the same time. No one saw the cost of holding the line because costs that don't include money tend to go unitemized. My hands shook once while I buttered toast. I steadied them on the edge of the counter and thought of my father teaching me to sand with the grain. He said patience was the difference between a smooth table and a ruined board. Pressure wants speed, so it can call you unreasonable when you resist. I gave it tempo. I took tempo back. There were moments I almost slid back into the easy chair of pleasing. A photo of my son as a toddler would bubble up, his cheeks full of jam, his laugh like a wind-up toy catching sunlight. Love tried to bribe me with the past. Respect answered, calm and taller. Hold for the future. I arrived at the restaurant with my envelopes and the line I had practiced. I sat. The candle lit its small vote for softness. The bread steamed. The text landed. You heard the rest. The pressure did its trick. I did mine. And while we held our forks like peace flags, something invisible aligned itself with a time set in a bank system by fingers that had learned steadiness at a kitchen table. The schedule was a string pulled taut across 2 rooms, mine and theirs. The plan didn't need to perform. It only needed to arrive when promised. At 7:15 p.m., I had asked the truth to step into the light. It would, because that is what schedules are for, not drama but daylight. The night carried me home like a steady ferry. I parked beneath the maple that drops tiny helicopters in spring and left the engine ticking to itself. The word soon had lived in my chest since the restaurant. It sounded less like a threat now, more like a door sliding into its track. I unlocked my house and walked in. The lemon oil on the table met me first. My bag settled in its usual chair with a soft sigh. I laid the envelopes out like small islands and picked up the one with the clause I had practiced reading without shaking. I didn't feel heroic. I felt accurate. Accuracy is quiet. It asks for nothing but follow through. The plan did not require a speech. It required gravity to finish the work. Gravity shows up when promised. Before dinner, I had checked the folders again. Not out of fear, but habit. That was when I found the little truth that pushed the plan from necessary to right. I had opened an old text thread to print the screenshot of the budget-conscious edit. A small icon blinked in the corner, the kind you ignore when you live with a phone that wants to be braver than it is. I clicked anyway. It opened a shared note linked to the thread. The title sat there, blunt and unashamed. Messages to Mom. Inside the note, phrases lined up like tools on a pegboard. We're concerned about your memory. Budget-conscious. Streamline. Temporary care plan. Each line wore the same neat punctuation my daughter-in-law loves. At the top, 2 tiny circles showed who had edited the note. His initial. Hers. Brighter. Revision history glowed faintly beneath the title. Her edits stacked like stepping stones across a river. The first edit belonged to last year's Thanksgiving. The most recent one landed this morning. The note was not a smoking gun. It was something simpler and less dramatic. A script with a stage manager. I printed one page. I circled the date of a line that had hurt more than it should have. Maybe it's time to simplify money access. The circle held my hand steady. Scripts make sense when you see them. You stop arguing with the performance and start talking to the person holding the clipboard. I stood at the kitchen sink and watched the kettle breathe. Steam rose, thinned, rose again. Across the room, under the lamp my husband rewired in a summer storm, the envelope for my son waited. It held a summary of the trust, a notice of revoked access, a copy of the clause with 3 simple requirements: basic respect in language and deed, presence, not performative, care that isn't transactional. The clause did not punish. It measured. People afraid of scales will call measurement cruel. I left the lamp on for its patience alone. When the hour approached, the house listened with me. The clock did not shout. It made the kind of sound you hear only when you have decided to stay. The bank system had the minute set. I had chosen it, like you choose a witness. I wanted the change to arrive when both of us were sitting upright, napkins polite, water within reach. I wanted the truth to have room to land without knocking over something fragile. I had also sent a small email earlier, short lines, no heat, a copy to my attorney, a copy to myself. Subject: confirming updates. The body read, "This confirms that account delegations are revoked, notifications are scheduled, and the trust is executed. All future requests must route through me or Ms. Hale. Kindly keep this for your records." That was the whole of it. I clicked send and stroked the back of the chair, the way you do when you tell Wood it held you when people didn't. I slept in the hour before my alarm like a harbor sleeps, awake to weather, calm on purpose. The morning's light had a pewter edge. Seattle does that before it brightens, holds back enough to keep your humility in practice. I ironed a shirt because crisp fabric can hold a person up when nerves think they are the boss. I put the envelopes into my bag and placed the photos packet behind them like a spine. The drive to the restaurant felt shorter. The road did not vote, it allowed. Headlights queued in orderly lines, and nobody took a lane that wasn't theirs. The city made its whirring noises, and the radio made its soft advertisements, and none of it asked me to be smaller. I parked, breathed, and walked in. You know the beginning because you were there, listening with me as silverware ticked and the text flashed and apologies tried on their softer sweaters. We reached the part where his words ran out of synonyms. He asked to reset. He reached for the bill and stopped. The candle died and rode its brief smoke. He put his phone away, believing the danger lived inside it. My palm rested again on the folder. The room widened enough to let a decision through. I told him I brought something. My voice was ready to be looked at. I slid the first envelope across the table. He stared, then looked at my face, then back to the paper like it might confess without being read. He took a breath and opened it. His fingers were steady. He has his father's hands when he tries to be careful. The top page was plain. Title, my name, a paragraph that felt like a handrail. It explained the trust in 3 sentences a tired person could understand. It explained that I remained the trustee, and that the trust owned the house and accounts placed there. It explained the family by actions clause. It was not poetry. It was weather. You dress for it and you do not argue with it. He read the clause twice. He swallowed once. The words respect, and presence, and care did not glare. They simply stood at their posts. On duty. He reached the line about the scholarship fund as alternate. He blinked. He grabbed at a smile that didn't want to come. He said he liked scholarships. He said it the way a person mentions a window while avoiding the wall that keeps the window in place. He looked up. His mouth worked around the word why. It came out shaped like how. That is common. People who prefer control ask how because it keeps their hands busy. I told him the answer would be short. I told him the clause existed because I needed a metric louder than denial. I told him love was welcome and unpriced. I told him respect had a ledger and I had learned to balance it. He turned the page and found the summary of the house, an LLC owned by the trust. Manager, me. His eyes flicked across the language about renovations and sales and signatures. He slowed at, requires manager approval. You could see the exact place where habit met a locked door. His face was a hallway, learning it had a wall. My son looked at me and tried something new. He asked if this was punishment. He asked with a tone that had finally stopped being a policy memo. The room got kinder when he used his own voice. I told him it was a boundary. Boundaries look like punishment to people who benefited from the lack of them. The sentence sat down between us and stretched its legs. It took up the space it had earned. His phone buzzed. A single haptic hum ran under our plates. The sound touched the forks and made a small, sympathetic ring. He flinched the way you flinch when a nurse taps your vein, and you remember every blood draw you've ever survived. He flipped the phone over. The screen wore a short banner, dry as toast. Permission changed. His thumb tried the banking app out of muscle memory. The login accepted him. The page loaded. The part he expected to open did not. The button he used like a front door had become a picture of a door. The second envelope slid across the white linen. He did not reach for it yet. He stared at the phone like a person staring at a painting, willing it to become a mirror. You can't make a canvas reflect you just because you're close enough to fog the glass. He put the phone down slowly. He opened the envelope. This packet held the revocations and notices. Each line had a date and a footer and the kind of small logos you ignore until you need to show them to someone who argues. He stopped at the copy of the alert schedule. 7:15 p.m. He looked up, startled, and then looked down, embarrassed for being startled. He pointed to the time and said nothing. Some numbers deserve silence. They are already speaking. He whispered, "Why now?" as if the table might punish a louder sound. I told him truth lands best where napkins are clean and people can drink water. I told him I wanted his breath to be steady when the floor shifted. He blinked hard. He has always been tender when given a why he expected to fear. His eyes darted to my bag. He had learned to recognize the shape of consequences. He asked if there was more. I took out the photos packet and set it beside his plate. The first image showed the spreadsheet cell labeled allowance. He winced. He turned the page. The next photo showed the forwarded utility email, where my address sat under an account name that wasn't mine. He closed his eyes. He turned the page again. He found the screenshot of the shared note. Messages to Mom. The revision history line glowed soft and damning. Her initial. His initial. The list of suggested phrases. He stared so long the ink felt warm. He reached for his water like it might cover the page if he tipped it. He didn't tip it. He looked at me instead. He said, very quietly, that he didn't know she had shared the note with me. I told him she hadn't. He closed his eyes again. That was the right size of grief for that sentence. When he opened them, he was older by an hour. That happens when truth walks toward you holding a clock. He began to speak and then stopped. You could see him picking through drawers in his mind, looking for words that didn't belong to the note. He found some. He said he was ashamed. He said he thought he was protecting me by making hard conversations easier to say. He said he didn't realize the words had started making decisions in our mouths. He looked at the clause again. He put his palm on it like a person swears on a book he finally respects. I reminded him I had not removed him from my life. I had removed uninvited hands from my wallet. I reminded him love, properly held, does not need passwords it didn't earn. I reminded him of the night at the hospital when I signed my name without asking anyone for permission to be his mother. He nodded as if memory were a door he could finally open, without a note telling him where to stand. He asked if he could see the language again about the scholarship alternate. I turned the page and let him read. He asked me which fund I had in mind. I told him about the state science fair and the tiny kids with big teeth who build bridges out of popsicle sticks and hope. He smiled for the first time in days, a short, honest smile that didn't ask for anything. The smile fell because the moment was not built to hold it. That was fine. Smiles don't need to prove stamina to count. He asked what happened if he and his wife changed. I told him the clause contained a review window that respected effort and time. I told him the measurements were simple and public, language that doesn't belittle, presence that doesn't vanish when money stops talking, acts of care that don't arrive with a tally in their pocket. He held that with both hands. It was heavier than he imagined and fairer than he feared. His phone, quiet until then, lit again. A text from her slid into the top corner. The preview did not care that we sat with envelopes between us. Did she cry? It asked the question like a person asks a weather app whether they should bring an umbrella to someone else's storm. He stared. He didn't swipe. He let the preview fade. The restraint took something from his face and returned something else. The exchange did not need an audience to count. I told him one more line. I kept it sharp, because dull knives bruise. You called me an asset. Assets have managers. The sentence did not raise its voice. It did not ask for applause. It installed itself. He absorbed it and didn't argue. He nodded once like a person recognizes a tool he misused and is relieved to learn its name. He asked if he could take the packet home. He meant to study, to show, to argue, to plan, in that order. I said he could take it if he promised to read the clause first, alone, out loud. The out loud was a small mercy that kept the words from becoming theater. He agreed. Agreements get fragile when they ride back seat, with panic. I watched him place the papers into his bag with care that wasn't performance. The waiter cleared plates. The small clatter sounded like a tiny palace rebuilding itself one fork at a time. We asked for tea. The sugar packets sat in their container like little flags planted in a country that remembered gentler rules. I tore one open and poured crystals into my cup. The sound was rain on a tin roof in miniature. It steadied me. He asked what I needed from him tonight, not tomorrow, not a week from now, tonight. The question was correct at last. I told him I needed him to call his wife and tell her the trust was set and the permissions were changed, and that he would not forward my emails, and that he would not let her draft his throat. I told him I needed him to say the phrase, "I am my mother's son," without flinching. He looked at his phone and then back at me. He said he could not do the first part in front of me. He said he could do the second part right now. He straightened. He looked me in the face with the soft brown eyes that have made my worst days bearable and my best days glow. He said, slowly, "I am my mother's son." He said it like a person building a bridge with his mouth. The room did not applaud. It did not need to. Some sentences clap for themselves by standing. He paid the bill without asking this time, not because control needed to perform, but because love recognized a shared table and did what it could. I let him. Allowing a decent act is not surrender. It is accuracy again, the night's quiet theme. We stood. Chairs whispered. Coats learned our shoulders again. He walked outside with me and lifted his face to the drizzle like a pilgrim at a Shire fountain. He asked if I was afraid to go home alone. I told him fear could ride in the back seat if it buckled in. He laughed. It came out like a bark, awkward and relieved. I kissed his cheek and smelled the soap he uses when he wants to feel like a better version of himself. It smells like pine and effort. In the car, I sat with my hands on the wheel and let the heat find my knees. My phone stayed face down until I turned the key. When I picked it up, there were 2 messages. One from Carmen, short as a match strike. Saw the push, well done. Sleep. One from my son, even shorter. Reading clause out loud. I put the phone away and watched the streetlight cycle through its calm ceremony. Red, holding, red, letting go. On the drive, the city wore its reasonable jewelry. Taillights strung themselves across the wet like small rubies. The wipers made measured lines and erased them without bitterness. I thought of the shared note again, the script that tried to tell our family what its voice should sound like. Scripts are useful for plays. We were not staging one anymore. We were writing in pen on paper that didn't apologize for being real. At a long pause behind a bus, I remembered something small and saving. The first month after my husband died, I left the porch light on by accident for 3 nights. On the 4th, the neighbor boy's mother knocked and asked if I was okay. I said I was. She said, "Your light says ask for help." We laughed. Then she brought me soup. Presence is not complicated. It is complicated to fake. I pulled into my driveway and let the engine make its tiny goodbyes. The house looked like itself, not like a listing. I unlocked the door and stepped into the air I know. It was the kind of air you can wear without feeling owned. I put the bag on the chair and the keys in the bowl and my hand on the table. The wood hummed the way old wood does, when its job is to hold steadiness for people who finally remember they deserve chairs. The phone buzzed once more, a text from her. It was longer than the preview, the kind of long that hope's length can stand in for substance. She wrote that she was disappointed I had refused help. She wrote that legal maneuvers damaged trust. She wrote that families don't need contracts to be kind. I let the words sit in their box. Then I replied with a single sentence I had saved for this exact field. Family is not a vote, it's a verb. I pressed send and put the phone face down again. I did not wait for the typing bubble. Bubbles are for baths, not for boundaries. I poured water into the kettle and set it on the flame. The click of the burner sounded like a firm yes from something that doesn't lie. I opened the drawer where I keep tea and reached for the lapsang. Smoke curled up once and called a memory to sit beside me, the kind that warms without giving orders. I leaned on the counter and listened to my house settle. Nothing asked for my signature. Nothing asked for my password. Everything that belonged to me recognized me without needing a script. I took the clause packet out again and read it, not because I doubted, but because reading it was a way of thanking the woman who signed it and the women who stood behind her through the years. Respect, presence, care. 3 words with no choreography required. 3 words that, if obeyed, keep kitchens honest. The neighbor's dog barked twice and then remembered it was night. Tires whispered past at the end of the block. A bus sighed. Somewhere, a pair of people were practicing the way they hurt each other with good intentions. Somewhere else, a kid was using his allowance to buy a model bridge kit. The world kept its noisy promises. Mine were fewer and heavier and chosen. I cleaned the cup in the sink and dried it with the towel that has a stitched lemon on one corner. I folded the towel over the oven handle and made sure the corners lined up. Not out of compulsion, but courtesy. My days are better when corners behave. I turned off the kitchen light and let the hallway carry me like a gentle argument toward bed. On the nightstand, my husband's picture watched with a patience that used to make me angry and now saves me. I told him, out loud, that I did not make our son smaller tonight. I told him I made our son roomier by refusing to shrink. I told him I was learning the difference between control and responsibility. He did not answer. He never does. The frame does the work for him. The phone lit again before I slept. My son had sent a voice memo, which is unlike him unless he wants me to hear without seeing. He read the clause. He stumbled on demeaning. He paused on presence. He said, the final line, clean. He ended with, I want to meet the clause. The sentence held its own weight. It carried his. I put the phone face down, finally. Not to avoid anything, but to let something else take a turn at being seen. I slept in the blue the dashboard had painted into me earlier. Sleep does not care about clauses. It respects closed doors and correct choices. It kept watch. Morning carried ordinary in with the light. Coffee steamed and left small rings like moons drying on the counter. I rinsed them and let the surface shine. I checked the locks without paranoia. I checked my pulse and found it using its inside voice again. I opened the window and let the air remind me there are rooms without spreadsheets. I wrote one email before I dressed. Subject, housekeeping. Body, locks updated. Utilities restored. Please use my address when sending mail. I will be at choir on Thursday. You can reach me after 8. M. I copied no one. I attached nothing. People who prefer control love copies and attachments. I was not performing a preference. I was informing. Informing is kindness when it is not a threat. At the door, my hand found the knob and then found the new deadbolt, and then found the small chain that always looked like decoration until it wasn't. The metal felt cool and reasonable. I opened to the morning and stepped out. The road waited. It doesn't change for anyone. It offered the same lanes, the same lines, the same distance to every light. That fairness used to irritate me when I wanted an easier drive. Now it felt like a vow the city kept on my behalf. At a stop on the hill, I watched rain stitch itself into a finer cloth. The Space Needle stood in the distance like a pin holding the sky to its place. I thought of my son standing in his kitchen, reading a clause out loud to a woman who had never had to read her own notes back to herself. I thought of the scholarship fund name written in a quiet box no one would see unless they needed to. I thought of a kid with a bridge that held, the glue setting while he slept. The light changed. The car behind me waited without honking. I pressed the pedal and felt the tires take me forward without discussion. The plan had not made me bulletproof. It had made me legible. People who can read themselves stop asking strangers to narrate them. By the time I reached the grocery, my phone had stopped trying to do the most. It sat like a tool in a drawer that doesn't rattle. Inside, I bought lemons and milk and flour, because bread still rises if you measure in weight. In the baking aisle, a woman told her toddler to use his inside voice. He tried, and then forgot, and then tried again. He will learn because the rule is simple and true, and designed for rooms with other people. At home again, I kneaded dough and let it be alive on purpose. I wiped the counter, set the bowl where the kitchen is warmest, and covered it with a towel. Yeast does its work quietly. It doesn't call a meeting. It asks for a clean bowl, time, and a person who knows when not to poke. I set a timer and laughed at myself because I had spent a week resenting timers and now felt grateful to one. Tools are never the problem. Who holds them is. The timer hummed. The dough had doubled. I pressed my fingers into it and felt the spring back against me. Not defensive, just sure. I shaped a loaf and set it to rise again. I thought of the claws and the way my son's voice had found its edges. I thought of the scholarship fund as a loaf you bake and give away without knowing whose hands it warms. I thought of my house like a kitchen that finally remembered its job was to feed, not to stage. When the crust turned the color of a sensible coat in November, I pulled it from the oven and set it on a rack. The smell stood the air up. I let the cooling speak for me while I cleaned the knife. The phone stayed still. The road outside went on being a fair road. The maples prepared their helicopters without asking who would stand below. I sliced the bread when it was ready and not a minute earlier. I took a heel, buttered it while the butter knew how to melt, and carried it to the table with a cloth beneath the plate because my mother taught me to respect surfaces that hold us up. I bit. The crust sang. The crumb said yes. And inside that small song was the sound I had been listening for all along, the one I wanted my son to hear without anyone drafting his mouth for him. It was the sound of the hinge catching after the door swings shut, not the slam, the click, quiet as a clause doing exactly what it promised. By nightfall, the house felt like itself again. The locks clicked with their modest music. The utilities answered to my name without drama. The mail slid through the slot with that small applause that kitchens understand. I brewed tea and let the steam mark the window, a quiet flag that belonged to no committee but mine. Consequences did not arrive as sirens, they arrived as tone. My son called and spoke in his own voice, not the edited one. He asked what presence looked like when it wasn't performance. I told him it looked like showing up and not turning the showing into currency. He asked for a chance to try. The phone, newly ordinary, did not throb while we spoke. Relief does that, turns a device back into a tool. His wife wrote longer messages. They came dressed in fairness and left lint everywhere. She said contracts meant distrust. I answered that contracts meant clarity and mercy, because they replaced moods with measurements. She stopped texting for a while. Silence can be dignity, or it can be strategy. Time would pick. The scholarship fund accepted its first deposit, a small sum, tidy and sincere. I kept the receipt beside the one from my son's last semester, stapled together like two ends of the same rope. Somewhere a kid's project would hold because a stranger believed in glue and intention. That thought steadied breakfast better than coffee. My son met the clause. He called on Tuesday and said he could drive me to my appointment. No speeches. He arrived on time and listened to the doctor without translating it into policy. He made a joke about the lobby plants. He did not take my bag when I stood. He asked, "You good?" and waited for words instead of deciding on my face. We ate soup afterward. He didn't reach for my phone. He paid the bill because kindness can move money without buying the table. The word presence fit differently on him that day. It fit like work chosen instead of work assigned. Later he called from the porch because he had a key once and chose not to use it. He held out a small envelope that smelled faintly of his soap. Inside was an apology written by him without coaching. The handwriting leaned left and tried hard to be even. He wrote that he had used "we" as a shield because it sounded responsible. He wrote that "we" had turned into a net that caught me without consent. He wrote that he would answer for his part with actions, not adjournments. I put the letter with the others in the drawer where I keep proof of weather changing. His wife stood at the end of the walk with her arms crossed like a bridge under repairs. She did not come up the steps. I waved. She gave me a nod that meant business, not war. Later she sent a single line, "I will read the clause." It was not a truce. It was an acknowledgement. Sometimes acknowledgements are the first planks in a decent crossing. I changed small things first. New locks, new passwords. New habit of placing my phone face down when the kettle sang. I set a weekly call on Thursday evenings where he and I talk like ordinary people about ordinary things, and the bourguignon, extraordinary work of not mistaking control for love. We keep it to 20 minutes. We end with a plan for soup or a walk. Boundaries grow stronger when they are routine, not event. At choir, I sang the lower alto line and remembered how harmony works when each part respects its place. The director smiled when I found the note that always outran me before. Breath is better when you're not surrendering it to someone else's sentences. After rehearsal, a friend asked if I had sorted the family stuff. I said I had named it. Naming isn't sorting, but it keeps socks from pretending to be scarves. A letter came from the attorney, crisp and boring in the best way. It summarized what lived where, what notified whom, what clauses governed which corners of the world that touched my name. I read it once at the table and once in the car while the heater cleared the windshield. Papers don't love you. They hold the floor steady, so love has a chance to stand without swaying. There were costs still. Leaning into a new posture makes muscles talk. Some mornings I missed the old softness that let everyone be comfortable, except me. Habit sent me to the group chat twice before I remembered I had left the room. I stood at the window then and watched rain walk the street like a patient choreographer. Comfort is a rhythm we teach ourselves. I was learning a new count. The trust didn't speak aloud, but it watched. When language slipped toward belittling, the clause waited like a weather report that doesn't scold, just points at the sky. When presence tried to disappear behind busyness, the clause cleared its throat. When help arrived with a receipt already filled out, the clause held out a blank page and a pen and looked at the clock. Measurement is not meanness. It is how bridges learn their own weight before someone drives a truck over them. My son faltered once. He sent a text drafted by another hand and deleted it after 6 minutes. He called to say he had typed and then read his own draft back and didn't recognize his mouth. He read it to me anyway and asked how it landed. We cut half the words and kept 4. I'll be there, Mom. He was. He carried my bag when I asked, not because carrying proves love, but because asking proves trust. It felt like the opposite of performance. It felt like a steady chair. His wife tried the door once without calling. The chain held. I opened far enough to be kind. We stood with wood between us, which sometimes saves more than it blocks. She said she feared becoming the villain in my story. I said villains are a luxury. Our lives don't have the budget. We have choices and their receipts. I handed her a copy of the clause and the letter about the house's new structure. She took them without theatrical sighs. She said, I don't like being measured. I said, neither did I, when the scale was someone else's mood. The line did not slam. It clicked. The neighbor's boy brought over a drawing of a bridge he made from popsicle sticks and patience. It arched too proudly and collapsed before it dried. He laughed and asked for more glue. We rebuilt while the bread rose. I sent him home with a heel and butter. He waved the drawing like a flag that knew tomorrow would need it again. Kids understand iteration faster than adults, who think love should make us perfect on the first try. When the bank sent a monthly notice, it read like a calendar, not an alarm. When the utility bill arrived, with my name and no forwarding, I set it under a magnet shaped like a lemon and smiled at the stupid joy of seeing myself printed where I live. When the realtor called to check in, I told him the house wasn't on the market. My dignity wasn't either. He said the market was cooling. I said good, then we can all breathe. I drove to choir one evening through a drizzle fine as thread. Traffic behaved. Headlights stitched a soft seam down the wet. I thought about the fancy word restitution and how small its cousins are. A tea delivered without hints, a text written without a partner editing from off stage, a Thursday call that starts and ends on time. Justice doesn't always appear as trumpets. Sometimes it comes as ordinary held steady over weeks, until ordinary becomes the point. On Sunday, my son knocked and waited. We ate soup again. We talked about his job and a book he is pretending to like. We washed dishes without turning the sink into a confessional. He asked if he could fix the wobbly chair. I said yes and handed him the correct screwdriver. He tightened the bolt and didn't grandstand. We sat. The chair held. Sometimes the metaphor tiptoes right into your kitchen and does the chores. When he left, he hugged me with his arms and not his plans. He said, I'm trying. I told him trying is a verb the clause respects. He smiled, small and honest. He walked down the steps and turned at the gate with his boyhood face for one quick frame. Grief touched my shoulder and then remembered we were busy. Love stayed and sat where it was told. I locked the door and rested my forehead on the wood like you do when the day has been long and clean. The air tasted like lemon and bread, and the quiet hum that houses make when every object knows its job again. I turned off the lamp my husband rewired and let the room become a lake where no one throws rocks to watch you ripple. Outside, the road kept its vow. Lanes waited. Signals changed with no bias toward any car. I drove to the grocery for milk and citrus. The dashboard painted my hands that kind listener blue. The wipers brushed away a light rain that had learned manners. The Space Needle slid by in the mirror like a pin holding the night in place. A long green light opened and stayed open, calm as a promise kept. If this kind of justice steadies you too, ride with me. Like, comment, and share as the light turns green.